My name is Emily Carter, and I am 26 years old. If you asked anyone in my hometown of Austin, Texas, about me a few years ago, they would have told you I was the quiet, ordinary girl who never amounted to much. The kind of girl people whispered about at family gatherings, polite, decent, but nothing special. I grew up in a middle-class family where appearances mattered more than love. My father, Richard Carter, ran a small accounting firm, and my mother, Diane, was a perfectionist who judged everything, from the food on the table to the clothes we wore, through the lens of status. I had an older sister, Jessica, who was the family's golden child. She married into money at 22, a successful lawyer's son, and instantly became the shining example my parents flaunted at every dinner party. "Look at Jessica," they would say, "she chose wisely. She elevated our family." And then there was me. The second daughter. The ordinary one. By the time I turned 24, I had been working as a librarian at the local university. I loved books, I loved quiet mornings, I loved the smell of ink on paper. But my mother considered it a dead-end job. She used to remind me, "Emily, you're wasting your life." A librarian? Do you think that's impressive? No one will marry you if you don't aim higher. Look at your sister, she made us proud. Her words cut deeper than she ever realized. So when I met Daniel Walker, my heart wanted to believe I had finally found someone who didn't see me as less. Daniel was kind, funny, and warm. He wasn't rich. He wasn't powerful. In fact, when we met, he was barely making ends meet running a small garage with his college friend. But he looked at me as if I mattered. And for the first time I believed I did. Fast forward 2 years later, I was 26, standing in front of a mirror in a beautiful white dress. The day of my wedding. I should have felt joy. Excitement. Butterflies. Instead, I felt emptiness. Because that morning, my mother had called me. Her voice was sharp, cold, almost triumphant. "Emily, your father and I have made a decision. We're not coming to your wedding. Neither are your uncles, your aunts, or Jessica's family. We can't support this mistake you're making. You're throwing your life away marrying a nobody. Don't expect us to be part of this humiliation." I remember holding the phone in my trembling hands, staring at the floor. My vision blurred with tears. "But Mom, he loves me. Isn't that what matters?" I whispered. She laughed bitterly. "Love doesn't pay the bills. Love won't give you status. When he fails, don't come crawling back to us." Then she hung up. The church that day was filled with Daniel's side, his college friends, a few cousins, neighbors who adored him. But my side of the church? Empty. Entire rows of seats that should have been filled with familiar faces, silent, bare, accusing. I tried to smile as I walked down the aisle, but my chest felt heavy. I felt exposed, abandoned, unworthy. Every whispered murmur behind me was like a dagger. Where's her family? Didn't they come? Why would they reject their own daughter? Daniel squeezed my hands when I reached him at the altar. His brown eyes searched mine, steady and reassuring. "I don't care who's not here, Emily," he whispered. "I'm here. And I always will be." I wanted to believe him. I wanted his words to erase the shame burning through me. But as I stood there, exchanging vows with tears slipping down my cheeks, a small, bitter voice inside whispered, "Maybe Mom was right. Maybe I am throwing my life away." The rejection didn't end on that day. Weeks later, when I tried to visit home, my mother refused to open the door. My father barely looked at me. My sister Jessica sent me a message, "Emily, you've embarrassed us all. Don't expect us to welcome you back until you realize your mistake. You married beneath you. You'll regret this when you're struggling for rent while the rest of us move forward in life. Every word was poison. Every silence was heavier than a scream. And yet, despite all of it, Daniel stood by me. He worked late nights at the garage, coming home with grease on his hands and a tired smile on his face. He made me coffee in the mornings, told me silly jokes when he caught me crying, and held me like I was the most precious thing in the world. But I couldn't ignore the pain. I couldn't forget the look of pride on Jessica's face when she paraded her expensive handbags, her luxury vacations, her sparkling diamond necklace, while I wore thrift store dresses and clipped coupons for groceries. One Thanksgiving, I made the mistake of calling my parents again, hoping time had softened their hearts. I wanted to invite them over, to share a meal, to at least try. My mother answered. "Emily? Oh. Still married to that mechanic?" she said with a mocking laugh. "Yes," I said quietly. "Daniel's doing well. The garage is slowly growing, and," she cut me off. "Don't try to convince me he's successful. We know the truth. You could have had so much more if you had listened to us. Look at Jessica. She's living in a mansion. What do you have? A tiny apartment and a husband who fixes cars? I can't believe you settled for this." Her words pierced me so deeply I had to sit down. I wanted to scream, to defend Daniel, to tell her that love mattered more than money. But all I could do was choke back tears. That night, I promised myself something. One day, they will regret every word. One day, they will look at me and wish they had stood by me. I didn't know how. I didn't know when. But I knew my story wasn't over yet. After the wedding, Daniel and I moved into a modest 2-bedroom apartment in South Austin. It wasn't much, peeling paint on the walls, an outdated stove, and neighbors who argued late into the night, but it was ours. Daniel worked tirelessly at his garage, often coming home past midnight, while I picked up extra shifts at the university library. We pinched pennies, saved every dime, and dreamed of better days. But the shadow of my family's rejection loomed large. Every time I scrolled through social media and saw my sister Jessica posting photos from luxury resorts, I felt that stab of inadequacy. I could hear my mother's voice taunting me, "See? You chose wrong. Look at what you missed out on." There were nights when Daniel and I had to choose between paying the electricity bill or buying groceries. I still remember sitting at our tiny kitchen table, staring at a stack of unpaid bills, my hands trembling. Daniel reached over, covering my hand with his grease-stained fingers. "Emily," he said softly, "I know it's hard. But this isn't forever. I believe in what we're building. One day, this will all change." I wanted to believe him. His optimism was unshakable, but mine faltered with every rejection call from my parents, every cold look from relatives in the supermarket. Sometimes, I wondered if I had made a mistake. Austin wasn't a big city where you could disappear into the crowd. Word traveled fast. At church, I overheard neighbors whispering, "She married that mechanic, didn't she? Poor girl. She could have done so much better." At the grocery store, an old family friend shook her head sympathetically. "Your sister is living the dream, Emily. Well, I suppose love is what matters, right?" Their words were meant to sound kind, but they burned like acid. Daniel noticed my growing silence, the way I avoided people, the way I curled into myself. One night, he pulled me close and whispered, "They don't see it now. But one day, you'll walk into a room, and every head will turn. They'll regret doubting us." I clung to his words, though deep down, I couldn't see how such a future was possible. Daniel wasn't just a mechanic. He was a visionary. Late at night, after long days at the garage, he would sketch designs on scrap paper. engines, hybrid models, energy-efficient prototypes. Emily, he would say, eyes shining with passion, the world is moving toward clean energy. What if we could create affordable electric vehicles for everyday people? Not Teslas for the rich, but cars for families like ours. I smiled and nodded, though secretly, I worried. Dreams were beautiful, but dreams didn't pay rent. Still, his conviction was magnetic. Slowly, I began to believe. 2 years after our wedding, Daniel and his friend pitched a small prototype at a local business expo. It was nothing fancy, a modified sedan converted to run on a cheap, energy-efficient battery pack. Most investors passed by without interest. But one man stopped. Mark Reynolds, a venture capitalist with a sharp suit and curious eyes. He asked questions, examined the prototype, and finally handed Daniel his card. "Call me," he said. "This has potential." Daniel came home that night glowing with excitement. He lifted me in his arms, spinning me around in our cramped kitchen. "Emily, this is it. Someone believes in us." For the first time in years, I saw a glimmer of hope. Hope, however, didn't erase the sting of family rejection. When Jessica hosted a grand holiday party that year, she sent me an invitation. Against my better judgment, I went. The moment I walked in, whispers filled the room. Jessica wore a diamond necklace that sparkled under the chandelier, her husband poured expensive wine, and my parents stood tall, beaming with pride. When they saw me, their smiles faltered. Jessica smirked. "Emily, I didn't expect you to come. Did your husband finally fix enough cars to buy you a dress for the occasion?" Laughter rippled through the crowd. My face burned. I forced a smile, clutching the hem of my simple thrift store dress. I tried to speak, but my mother cut me off. "Emily, dear, you could still undo your mistake. Leave him. You're still young enough to marry someone worthy." Their cruelty was a blade twisting deeper and deeper. I left the party in tears, Daniel's comforting arms around me. "Someday," he whispered, "they'll choke on those words." The following years were brutal. Daniel poured every ounce of energy into his startup, which he named Phoenix Motors, a symbol of rising from the ashes. I worked double shifts to support us, often coming home to find him asleep at his desk, surrounded by sketches and empty coffee cups. There were nights when I wanted to give up, when exhaustion crushed me, when I envied Jessica's glittering life. But Daniel's determination became my anchor. Slowly, things began to change. Mark Reynolds invested a modest sum. Then another investor followed. Daniel hired a small team. The prototype became sleeker, more efficient. By our 5th wedding anniversary, Phoenix Motors had secured a multi-million-dollar contract with a government clean energy initiative. I'll never forget the night Daniel came home with the news. He dropped a signed contract on the table, his eyes brimming with tears. "Emily, we made it." Suddenly, everything changed. We moved out of our cramped apartment into a modern townhouse. Daniel's face began appearing in business magazines. Phoenix Motors started gaining national attention as the future of affordable electric cars. And for the first time, my phone lit up with messages from my family. "Jessica, hey sis, heard Daniel's company is doing well. We should catch up sometime. Proud of you. Mom, Emily, maybe we judged too quickly. Why don't you come over for dinner? We'd love to reconnect." Their sudden warmth made my stomach twist. After years of rejection, now they wanted me back? I ignored their messages. For once, I had the power. One Sunday, Daniel and I drove past Jessica's mansion in our brand new luxury electric SUV, a Phoenix Motors model that hadn't even hit the market yet. As fate would have it, Jessica and her husband were in the front yard hosting a barbecue. When they saw us pull up, their jaws nearly dropped. Jessica tried to hide her shock with a smile. Emily. What a surprise. That's a beautiful car. Where did you get it? Danielle smirked. We built it. The look on her face, envy, disbelief, regret, was a glimpse of the revenge I had long dreamed of. And I knew then, this was only the beginning. 5 years had passed since the day I walked down the aisle with no family by my side. 5 years since the whispers, the shame, the rejection. Now, I was no longer Emily Carter, the girl everyone pitied. I was Emily Walker, wife of the billionaire founder of Phoenix Motors, the fastest-growing clean energy company in America. We lived in a glass-walled mansion overlooking Lake Austin. Every room gleamed with elegance. Every corner whispered proof that we had made it. Yet, in my heart, I carried the memory of that empty aisle. The silence of abandoned pews. The humiliation carved into my soul. And I waited for the day my family would see what they had thrown away. It came on a summer afternoon. Phoenix Motors announced its groundbreaking IPO, valued at $28 billion. Overnight, Danielle's face was everywhere: Forbes, Bloomberg, CNN. Words like visionary, genius, and future of the auto industry echoed across headlines. Reporters camped outside our mansion gates. Luxury brands sent gifts. Politicians requested meetings. And then, my phone rang. It was my mother. I stared at the screen, my chest tightening. 5 years of silence, and now she called? Against my better judgment, I answered. Emily, her voice trembled, we saw the news. Your husband, he's done so well. We're proud of you, sweetheart. Sweetheart. The word felt foreign on her lips. Proud? I whispered bitterly. Where was that pride when you left me alone on my wedding day? When you told me I was making the biggest mistake of my life? There was silence. Then a shaky sigh. We didn't know, Emily. We didn't see his potential. We just wanted the best for you. I laughed softly, though tears stung my eyes. No, you wanted status. You wanted me to marry money. Now that I have it, suddenly I'm worth your time again? She tried to speak, but I ended the call. A week later, Jessica invited us to a family dinner. Against my instincts, I agreed. Not because I wanted reconciliation, but because I wanted them to see, with their own eyes, what they had cast aside. When Daniel and I arrived at Jessica's mansion, heads turned. I stepped out of our chauffeur-driven car in a midnight blue gown, diamonds sparkling on my wrist. Daniel, in his tailored suit, looked every bit the billionaire visionary. The room fell silent. Jessica hurried over, her smile forced but desperate. Emily. Daniel. We're so glad you came. My mother's eyes filled with tears as she reached for my hands. Oh, Emily, look at you. We're so proud. I pulled my hands away. Proud? Or envious? Dinner was a circus of fake smiles and awkward conversations. My father boasted about how he always knew Daniel was brilliant, conveniently forgetting his cruel words years ago. Jessica tried to impress Daniel with business questions she barely understood. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I set down my glass and stood. Do you remember, I said, my voice calm but cutting, my wedding day? The empty pews? Do you remember the phone calls you ignored, the door you shut in my face, the words you used to humiliate me? The room froze. My mother's lips trembled. Emily, we made mistakes. We didn't realize, I raised a hand. No. You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. You chose to value wealth over love. And you chose to abandon me because I didn't fit your definition of success. You left me broken and humiliated. And now, only now, when the world calls my husband a billionaire genius, do you remember I exist? Jessica's eyes glistened. Emily, please. We were wrong. Can't we move past this? I looked around the table, the same faces that once mocked me, now desperate for my approval. No, I said firmly. You don't get to rewrite the past. You don't get to claim my success as yours. You weren't there in the nights we couldn't pay rent. You weren't there when I cried myself to sleep. You weren't there when Daniel worked till dawn. You abandoned me when I needed you most. And now, I don't need you at all. The silence was deafening. My mother began to cry softly. My father's face flushed with shame. Jessica looked down, her perfect image cracked. I turned to Daniel, who gave me the smallest nod. Together, we rose from the table. As we walked toward the door, I paused and looked back one last time. I once begged for your love, I said quietly. But today, I stand with a man who gave me everything I ever needed, without your approval. That is my revenge. That is my victory. And with that, we left. That night, standing on the balcony of our mansion, I watched the city lights shimmer on the lake. Daniel wrapped his arms around me, his chin resting on my shoulder. Do you feel better? He asked softly. I nodded. Not because they regret it, but because I finally don't need their validation. I thought revenge would be about proving them wrong. But really, it's about knowing I was right to choose love. He kissed my temple. And look where love got us. I smiled through tears, gazing at the skyline. My family said I would never succeed, I whispered. But 5 years later, I returned as the billionaire's wife.